Imagine a universe where humanity is considered the weakest, most primitive species in the galaxy. Where alien civilizations have written us off as insignificant creatures barely capable of basic space travel. They've observed our small colonies, our simple trading vessels, our peaceful exploratory missions, and concluded that humans are harmless, perhaps even pitiful. But what happens when these advanced alien species encounter something they never expected to see? What happens when they witness the true nature of human engineering, human strategy, and human warfare for the first time? In the cold depths of space, where silence is broken only by the hum of starship engines, first contact is about to take a very different turn than anyone anticipated. The galaxy is about to learn that there's a vast difference between humanity at peace and humanity at war. And some lessons can only be taught once. This is the story of that moment when the universe's perception of humanity changed forever in a matter of hours. The bridge of the Kytherian research vessel Wisdom's Edge hummed with quiet efficiency. Commander Zethkar ran his primary tentacle along the smooth surface of his command console, reviewing the day's scan results from the Outer Rim territories. The ship's bioluminescent walls pulsed with a soft blue glow, indicating all systems were operating within normal parameters. For the Kytherians, this deep space survey mission was routine. As one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, they had been exploring and cataloging star systems for over 3 millennia. Their technology was sophisticated beyond measure: ships that could phase shift through subspace, weapons that could destabilize molecular bonds, shields that bent reality itself around them. They were, by any reasonable measure, apex predators of the cosmos. "Commander," called out Navigator Yelthana from her station, her crystalline voice carrying the musical tones typical of her species. "I'm detecting an anomalous energy signature approximately 12 parsecs off our starboard vector." Zethkar's compound eyes focused on his tactical display. After 700 years of service, very little in space could be classified as truly anomalous. Stellar phenomena, ancient artifacts, even the occasional rogue black hole, he had seen them all. Classification? Unknown, sir. The energy pattern doesn't match any known stellar or technological signatures in our database. Yelthana's tentacles danced across her console with practiced ease. It appears to be artificial in nature, but the design philosophy is unfamiliar. Chief Science Officer Delmonth looked up from his research station, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the data. "Commander, permission to adjust our course for closer investigation? This could represent a significant scientific discovery." Zethkar considered the request. The Wisdom's Edge was equipped with the most advanced sensor arrays and defensive systems the Kytherian collective could produce. Whatever they might encounter out here, they were more than capable of handling it. "Granted. Set course for the anomaly. Standard survey protocols." As the ship altered its trajectory, the bridge crew began their preparations with methodical precision. The Kytherians prided themselves on their scientific approach to exploration. Every new discovery was catalogued, analyzed, and integrated into their vast knowledge database. It was this systematic approach that had made them one of the 3 dominant powers in the galaxy, alongside the militaristic Vorthan Empire and the technologically transcendent Nexari synthesis. "Range, 8 parsecs and closing," Yelthana reported. "Energy signature is strengthening. I'm reading what appears to be multiple distinct power sources." "Multiple sources?" Zethkar's interest was piqued. A single unknown energy signature might represent a new stellar phenomenon or perhaps an ancient derelict. Multiple coordinated signatures suggested active technology, possibly even a first contact scenario. "Can you determine the number of sources?" "Negative, sir. The readings are inconsistent. Almost as if the sources are employing some form of emission dampening technology." Delmontha's excitement was visible in the rapid flickering of his bioluminescent patches. "Fascinating. A civilization capable of masking their energy signatures while maintaining operational status. This could indicate a previously unknown level of technological sophistication." The bridge fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. In their thousands of years of exploration, the Kytherians had encountered hundreds of species and dozens of spacefaring civilizations. Most fell into predictable categories: young races struggling with basic interstellar travel, established civilizations with technology roughly equivalent to their own, or ancient species so advanced they had moved beyond physical existence entirely. 5 parsecs and, closing, Yelthana announced. I'm beginning to resolve individual contacts. Commander. I count at least 30 separate energy sources. 30? Zefkar's tactical mind immediately began processing threat assessments. A fleet of 30 vessels from an unknown civilization could represent anything from a peaceful convoy to an invasion force. Weapons status? All defensive systems are online and ready, responded Tactical Officer Krendel, his scarred carapace a testament to his experience with the collective's military forces. However, sir, I should point out that 30 ships of unknown capability could potentially overwhelm even our advanced defensive systems if they prove hostile. Noted. Continue approach, but increase alert status to amber. Begin long-range scans for vessel classification. The Wisdom's Edge continued its approach, its advanced sensors probing ahead into the depths of space. What they found defied easy categorization. The vessels ahead showed a mixture of technological signatures that seemed almost primitive in some respects, yet startlingly sophisticated in others. Metal hulls instead of bioadaptive materials, chemical propulsion systems alongside what appeared to be some form of spatial compression drive, and energy weapons that used focused plasma instead of the more advanced particle disintegration beams favored by most spacefaring species. I'm detecting broadcast transmissions, reported Communications Officer Vendara. Multiple frequencies, multiple encryption protocols. Some appear to be tactical communications, others seem to be entertainment? Entertainment? Dalmentha's tentacles curled with confusion. They're broadcasting entertainment signals during what appears to be a military operation? Vendara's translator worked overtime to process the alien signals. The broadcasts include what appear to be music, dramatic performances, and competitive sporting events? Sir, these beings seem to be treating this deployment as routine enough to maintain normal recreational activities. Zefkar felt a chill run through his nervous system. Any species confident enough to maintain entertainment broadcasts during a military deployment either possessed overwhelming technological superiority or had grown so accustomed to victory that they no longer viewed potential combat as worthy of special attention. Range, 2 parsecs. I'm getting clear visual identification now, Yelthana announced. Commander, you need to see this. The main display activated, showing the distant fleet in full detail. What the crew of the Wisdom's Edge saw challenged their understanding of starship design. The vessels were massive, not just in length but in sheer bulk. Where most advanced civilizations had learned to build ships that were elegant and efficient, these craft were brutally functional. They bristled with weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, and what appeared to be launch bays for smaller craft. But it wasn't just the size or the obvious military focus that unsettled the Kytherian crew. It was the clear evidence of battle damage. Scorch marks from energy weapons, patches of newer metal where repairs had been made, missing sections that had been temporarily sealed. These weren't parade ground vessels or exploration ships. These were warships that had seen extensive combat and survived. Sir, Krendel's voice carried a note of professional concern. I'm reading power outputs that suggest these vessels are operating at full combat readiness. Their weapons are charged, shields are at maximum, and their smaller craft appear to be conducting patrol sweeps. They've detected us, Vendara added. I'm receiving a transmission on standard galactic frequencies. On screen. The image that appeared on the main display was unlike anything in the Kytherian database. The being that faced them was clearly carbon-based, bipedal, with bilateral symmetry, a fairly common evolutionary template. But there was something in its bearing, in the way it held itself, that spoke of predatory confidence. Its skin was a pale pink-brown, its eyes a startling blue that seemed to focus with uncomfortable intensity even through the transmission. When it spoke, its voice was level and professional, but carried undertones that made even the experienced Kytherian crew members uneasy. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You are approaching a restricted military zone. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. The translation software struggled momentarily with certain concepts. Terran had no direct equivalent in any known language, and Defense Force seemed to imply a military organization focused on protection rather than conquest, which was unusual among spacefaring civilizations. Zethkar composed himself and activated the communication array. Admiral Chen, I am Commander Zethkar of the Kytherian research vessel Wisdom's Edge. We detected unknown energy signatures and approached to investigate. We mean no harm and request peaceful contact. There was a pause. During those few seconds, Dalmentha's sensors detected increased activity among the human fleet. Ships that had been in loose formation began moving into what could only be described as a combat spread. The smaller craft increased their patrol frequency. Most tellingly, several of the largest vessels began rotating to present what appeared to be their heaviest weapon systems toward the Wisdom's Edge. Admiral Chen's response, when it came, carried a note of what the translation software identified as curiosity mixed with caution. Kytherian. We're not familiar with your species, Commander. Our records show no previous contact with your people. Where exactly do you come from? We represent the Kytherian Collective, one of the founding members of the Galactic Council. We have been exploring and cataloging this region of space for over 3,000 years. Perhaps the question is more appropriate in reverse. We have no record of your species or your defense force. Another pause. This time, Zethkar could see Admiral Chen turning to speak with others outside the transmission range. When she returned her attention to the screen, her expression had hardened slightly. Commander, I'm going to be direct with you. This system and the surrounding parsecs are under human control. We've claimed salvage rights to everything in this area under the Terran Colonial Expansion Act. Now, I'm willing to believe that you didn't know about our presence here, but that brings up some interesting questions. Yelthana looked up from her navigation station with confusion clear in her bioluminescent patterns. Sir, there's no record in our charts of any territorial claims in this region. According to our surveys, this entire sector is uninhabited. Zethkar nodded to her, then addressed the human admiral again. Admiral Chen, our records indicate this region has been unoccupied for several millennia. Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding, Commander, Admiral Chen interrupted, and now her voice carried a harder edge. Let me clarify something. 3 weeks ago, we engaged and destroyed a hegemony battle fleet in this system. 37 enemy vessels, including 2 dreadnoughts. We're here conducting salvage operations and ensuring that no hegemony survivors are attempting to establish a foothold. The bridge of the Wisdom's Edge fell completely silent. The hegemony, officially known as the Zarthak Dominion, was one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy. Their fleets had conquered dozens of worlds and had never been decisively defeated in open battle. The idea that this unknown human force had not only fought them but completely destroyed a battle fleet was almost incomprehensible. You destroyed a hegemony battle fleet? Dalmentha spoke before he could stop himself, his voice cracking with disbelief. Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral, but something that might have been grim satisfaction flickered in her eyes. That's correct. 37 Zarthak vessels eliminated with minimal human casualties. Standard fleet action for the TDF. Standard. She had called the complete destruction of a hegemony battle fleet standard. Krendel checked his readings 3 times before speaking. Commander, I'm detecting massive residual energy signatures throughout the system. Plasma residue patterns, debris fields, ionization trails. Sir, they're telling the truth. Something significant happened here recently. Zethkar felt his world shifting. Everything the Kytherian Collective thought they knew about the balance of power in the galaxy might be fundamentally wrong. Admiral Chen, forgive my directness, but we have no records of humanity as a major military power. In fact, we have no records of humanity at all. When did your species achieve interstellar travel? The human admiral's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. Define interstellar travel, Commander. We've had faster-than-light capability for about 40 years now. But we've been operating in space for much longer than that. 40 years. The Kytherians had possessed FTL capability for over 5,000 years, and they considered themselves relatively young among the spacefaring civilizations. A species that had only achieved interstellar travel 40 years ago should barely be capable of establishing colonies on neighboring systems, much less fielding fleets capable of defeating the hegemony. I think, Admiral Chen continued, that you and I need to have a longer conversation. But, not here, and not over an open channel. Would you be willing to come aboard my flagship? I can guarantee your safety, and I think there's a lot we both need to learn. Zethkar looked around his bridge at his crew. Each of them wore expressions of uncertainty and concern. They were facing the unknown in a way that their advanced civilization had not experienced in millennia. But, they were also scientists and explorers. The potential knowledge to be gained from this contact could reshape their understanding of the galaxy. Admiral Chen, he said finally, I accept your invitation. The shuttle bay of the TDF battleship Indomitable was unlike anything Commander Zethkar had ever seen. As his diplomatic shuttle settled onto the deck plating with a gentle thud, he observed the organized chaos of a military vessel at work through his viewport. Human crew members moved with purposeful efficiency, conducting maintenance on fighter craft, loading supply containers, and managing the constant flow of personnel and equipment. What struck him most was the sheer scale of everything. The Indomitable was massive even by Kytherian standards, but, where their ships achieved size through elegant bioadaptive materials and energy-based systems, this human vessel was built from raw metal and composite materials. Everything about it spoke of brute force engineering, function over form taken to an almost artistic extreme. Commander, Delmonth whispered as they prepared to disembark, the radiation signature from their reactor systems is unlike anything in our database. The power output appears to be several orders of magnitude beyond what their apparent technological level should allow. Zethkar nodded, keeping his observations to himself. The humans had agreed to allow him to bring 2 companions for this meeting, and he had chosen his science officer and his cultural specialist, Insera. If they were going to make first contact with a previously unknown civilization, he wanted the best analytical minds his crew could provide. The shuttle ramp lowered, and immediately Zethkar noticed something else unusual, the atmospheric composition. The air was thick with industrial scents, metal and polymer and something else he couldn't identify. It was the smell of heavy manufacturing and constant activity. Most advanced civilizations had moved beyond such crude atmospheric signatures millennia ago. A human officer approached them, her uniform crisp and her bearing unmistakably military. She was tall for her species, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and eyes that missed nothing as they appraised the alien visitors. Commander Zethkar, she said in accented but clear galactic standard, I'm Captain Maria Santos, Admiral Chen's aide. The Admiral is waiting for you in Conference Room Alpha. If you'll follow me? As they walked through the corridors of the human ship, Zethkar's senses were overwhelmed with new data. The walls were lined with what appeared to be manual control panels, physical switches and displays rather than the thought-responsive interfaces used by most advanced civilizations. Crew members they passed were engaged in hands-on maintenance work, actually using tools to repair and adjust equipment. Captain Santos, Insera ventured, forgive my curiosity, but why do your crew members perform manual labor? Surely your technology is advanced enough to automate such tasks? Santos glanced back with what appeared to be surprise. Manual maintenance? Well, automated systems are fine for routine operations, but when you're in combat, you need people who can jury-rig solutions with spare parts and determination. Machines break down. People adapt. The cultural implications of that statement were staggering. This was a civilization that expected their technology to fail under stress and had designed their entire operational philosophy around human adaptability rather than technological superiority. They passed through what appeared to be a recreation area, where off-duty crew members were engaged in various activities. Some were gathered around screens watching what appeared to be competitive events, others were engaged in what could only be described as mock combat using padded weapons, and still others were creating art using primitive but effective techniques. They maintain individual recreational activities during military operations, Delmonth observed quietly. Their stress management protocols are highly sophisticated despite their apparently low technological base. Conference Room Alpha was spacious but utilitarian, with a large table surrounded by chairs designed for human physiology. Admiral Chen was waiting for them, along with 2 other humans, a man in a similar uniform who radiated the same predatory competence as the Admiral, and a woman in civilian clothing who appeared to be some kind of scientist or analyst. Commander Zethkar, Admiral Chen rose and extended her hand in what was clearly a greeting gesture. Welcome aboard the Indomitable. I hope your trip over was comfortable. Zethkar carefully extended one of his tentacles to make contact with her hand, noting the surprising strength in her grip. Thank you for your hospitality, Admiral. May I present Science Officer Delmonth and Cultural Specialist Ian Sarah? Of course. This is General Marcus Webb, Commanding Officer of our Marine Contingent, and Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, our Xenobiological Specialist. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. As they settled around the table, Admiral Chan activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the local galactic region. Zethkar was surprised to note that the human cartographic data was remarkably accurate and detailed. Commander, before we go any further, I think we need to establish some basic facts. You say you represent something called the Galactic Council. Can you tell me more about that? Zethkar gestured toward the display. The Galactic Council is the primary governing body for interstellar relations in this region of the galaxy. It was established approximately 8,000 years ago by the three founding civilizations, the Kytherian Collective, the Vorthan Empire, and the Nexari Synthesis. We oversee trade, territorial disputes, and contact protocols for over 200 member species. Dr. Harrison leaned forward with obvious interest. 200 species? That's remarkable. How many of these are spacefaring civilizations? Approximately 60 have achieved independent FTL capability. The others are either pre-spaceflight societies under protection protocols or client species of the major powers. General Webb's expression remained neutral, but Zethkar noticed his posture shift slightly. And, in all that time, none of these civilizations ever encountered humanity? No, Ian Sarah answered. In fact, our surveys of this region indicated only primitive carbon-based lifeforms on what I assume is your homeworld. When did humanity achieve sentience? The three humans exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes. Admiral Chen spoke carefully. Commander, I think there may be a fundamental misunderstanding here. Humanity achieved what you might call modern sentience approximately 50,000 years ago. We've had complex civilizations for at least 12,000 years. The silence in the room was profound. Delmonth's bioluminescent patches flickered rapidly as he processed this information. That's impossible. Our deepest surveys of this region were conducted only 5,000 years ago. We found no evidence of advanced civilization. How deep were your surveys? Dr. Harrison asked with apparent scientific interest. Complete orbital scans of all potentially habitable worlds, atmospheric analysis, electromagnetic signature detection, technological artifact identification. Standard protocols developed over millennia of exploration. General Webb leaned back in his chair. Did your surveys include surface-level investigation? Surface investigation is rarely necessary. Any civilization capable of interstellar significance would produce electromagnetic signatures detectable from orbit. Admiral Chen smiled, and, for the first time, it wasn't entirely reassuring. Commander, 5,000 years ago, humanity was in what we call the medieval period. We had complex societies, sophisticated engineering, advanced mathematics, and astronomy. But, we communicated primarily through physical messages and had no electromagnetic technology that would be detectable from space. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. You're saying that your species developed complex civilization while remaining electromagnetically invisible? That's exactly what I'm saying. And, here's where it gets interesting. Admiral Chen manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on Earth's solar system. We didn't just suddenly appear as a spacefaring civilization 40 years ago. We spent 500 years developing space technology using chemical rockets and primitive electronics. We established orbital stations, lunar bases, asteroid mining operations, and interplanetary colonies using technology that wouldn't register on your sensors as significant. Dr. Harrison added, by the time we developed our first FTL drives, we already had a substantial infrastructure throughout our home system and had begun establishing footholds in nearby systems. We'd been watching your civilizations from a distance for decades. Watching us? Ian Sarah's voice carried a note of alarm. Scientific observation, mostly, Admiral Chen assured her. We knew we weren't alone in the galaxy, but we also knew we weren't ready for contact. So we observed, we learned, and we prepared. General Webb's contribution was delivered with military precision. What we observed was a galaxy dominated by three major powers with highly advanced technology but relatively small military forces. Most conflicts seem to be resolved through technological superiority or political maneuvering rather than extended warfare. That's correct, Zethkar confirmed. Advanced civilizations have moved beyond the primitive practice of large-scale military conflict. Disputes are resolved through the Council using economic pressure, technological exchange, or limited police actions. Limited police actions, General Webb repeated thoughtfully. What's the largest military engagement in recent Council history? Dalmanth consulted his personal database. The Rigel incident 15 years ago involved approximately 40 vessels from 3 different civilizations. It was considered a major crisis and was resolved through Council mediation after only 6 hours of actual combat. The humans exchanged those meaningful glances again. Admiral Chan leaned forward. Commander, 3 weeks ago we fought a single engagement against the Zarthak hegemony that lasted 14 hours and involved over 200 vessels on both sides. It wasn't even considered a major operation by our standards. The room fell silent again as the aliens processed this information. Finally, Ian Sarah spoke quietly. How large are your military forces? Classified, obviously, Admiral Chen replied. But, I can tell you that what you see here represents a single patrol group conducting routine salvage operations. The force that engaged the hegemony fleet was a standard battle group responding to an incursion into human space. Human space? Zethkar's voice cracked slightly. How much territory does humanity control? Dr. Harrison activated a different section of the holographic display. Currently, we have established territorial claims on approximately 300 star systems, with permanent installations in about half of them. We consider an additional 2,000 systems to be within our sphere of influence for defense purposes. The scale was incomprehensible. Even the largest Council civilizations controlled perhaps 50 star systems directly and claimed influence over a few hundred more. Humanity, unknown to the galactic community just days ago, apparently controlled territory comparable to the 3 founding civilizations combined. But, how is that possible? Dalmanth demanded. With only 40 years of FTL capability, how could you establish such an extensive territorial presence? General Webb answered with what Zethkar was beginning to recognize as characteristic human bluntness. We didn't wait around. When we developed FTL technology, we immediately began expansion operations. We identified strategically valuable systems, established bases, and built up infrastructure as fast as our industrial capacity would allow. And, when you encountered resistance? Ian Sarah asked. We overcame it, Admiral Chen said simply. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Admiral Chen's personal communicator. She listened for a moment, then looked up with an expression that combined satisfaction with something that might have been anticipation. Gentlemen, lady, she said, addressing both her human colleagues and the alien visitors, I just received word that another hegemony fleet has been detected entering the system. 12 vessels, including what appears to be one of their new heavy cruisers. Zethkar felt his nervous system flood with alarm. A hegemony fleet, even a small one, represented a significant military threat. His own ship, advanced as it was, would be no match for 12 Zarthak vessels. Admiral, he said urgently, my ship should withdraw immediately. We are not equipped for military engagement, and our loss would create a serious diplomatic incident. Admiral Chen looked at him with what appeared to be surprise. Commander, why would you need to withdraw? They're only sending 12 ships. Only 12 ships? Dalmantha's bioluminescent patterns flickered with panic. Admiral, a single hegemony cruiser carries enough firepower to destroy a small moon. 12 vessels represent a significant battle fleet. General Webb stood up and moved to a wall-mounted display that showed the ship's current status. Admiral, we've got the Indomitable, the Wellington, and the Stalingrad in immediate response range. The Yorktown and New Delhi can be here in 30 minutes. Should I scramble the alert fighters? Not yet, Marcus. Let's see what they do first. They might just be testing our response time. Admiral Chen turned back to the aliens. Commander, I understand your concern, but I assure you that your ship is in no danger. We have this situation well in hand. Admiral, Zethkar said carefully, I don't think you understand the threat you're facing. The Zarthak hegemony has one of the most advanced and aggressive military forces in the galaxy. Their weapons technology is centuries ahead of most civilizations. Dr. Harrison consulted a handheld device and looked up with interest. Actually, Commander, we've had extensive opportunities to analyze hegemony technology over the past few months. While their energy weapons are quite sophisticated, their defensive systems and tactical doctrine have significant vulnerabilities. Past few months? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Oh yes, Admiral Chen said casually, this isn't our first encounter with the hegemony. We've been engaged in what you might call an ongoing territorial dispute for about 8 months now. How many engagements have there been? General Webb checked his own device. 17 major actions, maybe 40 or 50 smaller skirmishes. The enemy has lost approximately 300 vessels. We've lost, what is it now, Maria? Captain Santos, who had been quietly observing from near the door, answered without hesitation. 14 ships destroyed, 27 requiring major repairs. Casualties have been remarkably light. Zethkar felt reality shifting around him again. The humans were describing a military conflict larger than any in recorded galactic history, and they were discussing it with the casual attitude of beings describing routine maintenance operations. 300 hegemony vessels, Delmonth repeated numbly. You've destroyed 300 of their ships in 8 months. Actually, Dr. Harrison corrected, that number includes captured vessels that we've taken as prizes. We've only destroyed about 260. The captured ships have provided excellent intelligence on their technology and tactical capabilities. Admiral Chen's communicator chimed again. She listened, then nodded. The hegemony ships have entered weapons range and are adopting an attack formation. Commander Zethkar, would you like to observe how we handle this situation? It might help answer some of your questions about human military capabilities. Zethkar looked at his companions. Both of them appeared to be in states of shock, but their scientific curiosity was warring with their fear. This was an unprecedented opportunity to observe advanced military technology in action. Yes, he said finally. We would be honored to observe. Admiral Chen smiled, and this time it was definitely not reassuring. Excellent. Maria, escort our guests to the tactical center. General, I think it's time to show the hegemony that this system is under new management. The tactical center of the Indomitable was a study in controlled chaos. Dozens of human operators sat at stations that displayed real-time tactical information, their hands dancing across controls with practiced efficiency. The main display showed a three-dimensional representation of the local space, with the human vessels marked in blue and the approaching hegemony fleet in red. Commander Zethkar watched in fascination as the humans prepared for battle. There was no panic, no rushed activity, no signs of the desperate urgency that typically accompanied military engagements. Instead, the crew moved with the calm professionalism of beings who had done this many times before. Tactical assessment, Commander Hayes, Admiral Chan requested as she settled into her command chair. A young human officer looked up from his station. 12 hegemony vessels confirmed, Admiral. Configuration matches previous encounters, 1 heavy cruiser, for standard cruisers, 7 destroyers. They're maintaining standard Zarthak attack formation and approaching at 0.7 lightspeed. Estimated time to engagement range? 14 minutes at current velocity, Admiral. Admiral Chen nodded and turned to address the alien observers. Commander Zethkar, what you're about to see might challenge some of your assumptions about human technology and tactics. I want to assure you that everything we do here is standard operating procedure for the Terran Defense Force. Delmonth leaned forward, his bioluminescent patches flickering with nervous energy. Admiral, if I may ask, why are you not raising shields or charging weapons? Surely defensive preparations should begin immediately when facing a superior force. Superior force? General Webb, who had taken a position near the tactical displays, looked genuinely confused. "Commander, they only brought 12 ships. We have 3 capital ships in immediate response range, plus a full fighter wing and escort vessels. They're outnumbered 2 to 1. But, Admiral," Sarah protested, "a single hegemony heavy cruiser carries the firepower equivalent to at least 10 vessels of most other species. Their weapon systems are based on quantum disruption technology that can penetrate virtually any known defensive system." Commander Hayes looked up from his station with interest. "Are you referring to their primary particle beam arrays? We've seen those. Impressive energy output, but they have significant limitations in terms of firing rate and target acquisition." Dr. Harrison, who had accompanied them to the tactical center, consulted her handheld device. "The quantum disruption effect is quite sophisticated, but it requires a sustained beam contact to achieve molecular bond breakdown. Their targeting systems have trouble maintaining lock on vessels employing high-energy evasive maneuvers." The casual way these humans discussed countering hegemony weapons technology was deeply unsettling to the Kytherian observers. These were weapons that had conquered dozens of star systems and defeated some of the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. "Admiral," came a report from the communication station, "the hegemony vessels are broadcasting on standard frequency. They're demanding our immediate withdrawal from the system." Response? "Standard territorial notification, Admiral. We've informed them that this system is under human control and they are trespassing in violation of interstellar law." Admiral Chan smiled grimly. "I don't suppose they're accepting that answer?" "Negative, Admiral. They're maintaining approach vector and have begun charging weapons." "Well, we tried diplomacy." Admiral Chan activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is the Admiral. We have incoming hegemony vessels that have refused to acknowledge our territorial claims. Battle stations. This is not a drill." Throughout the ship, Zethkar could hear the subtle changes in activity as the crew prepared for combat. But what struck him most was the absence of fear or uncertainty in their movements. These humans were preparing for battle against one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy with the same calm efficiency they might use to prepare for a training exercise. "Admiral," Commander Hayes reported, "all ships report ready for engagement. Weapons charged, shields at maximum, fighter squadrons ready for launch." "Very good. Signal the fleet, engage on my command. Rules of engagement are weapons free. Any vessel that fires on human forces is to be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." Zethkar watched the tactical display as the red dots representing the hegemony fleet continued their approach. At 8 light-minutes range, the Zarthak vessels opened fire, their powerful energy beams lancing across space toward the human ships. What happened next defied everything the aliens thought they knew about space combat. Instead of the ponderous maneuvering typical of advanced civilizations, the human ships erupted into motion with startling speed and agility. They scattered in multiple directions, their courses seemingly random but actually coordinated with mathematical precision. The hegemony weapons, designed to target vessels moving in predictable patterns, found themselves firing at empty space. "Evasive pattern Delta 7 initiated," Commander Hayes announced calmly. "All vessels maintaining formation integrity. Enemy weapons effectiveness reduced to approximately 15%. Admiral Chan leaned back in her command chair. "Return fire. Target the lead cruiser first, let's see how well their shields hold up against concentrated bombardment." The human response was immediate and devastating. Unlike the single massive beams favored by most spacefaring civilizations, the human ships unleashed a coordinated barrage of multiple weapon types. Plasma cannons, particle beams, kinetic projectiles, and weapons that the aliens couldn't immediately identify, all focused on the lead hegemony cruiser. The result was spectacular. The Zarthak vessel's shields, which should have been able to deflect any single weapon system, collapsed under the combined assault within seconds. Secondary explosions began ripping through the ship's hull as the human weapons found their targets. "Lead cruiser is taking critical damage," Commander Hayes reported with professional detachment. "Hull breaches on multiple decks, reactor containment failing. They're attempting to withdraw." "Negative," Admiral Chan responded. They fired first. Continue engagement until target is neutralized. The alien observers watched in horrified fascination as the human fleet systematically destroyed the hegemony cruiser. But what disturbed them most was the efficiency of the process. There was no dramatic duel of energy beams, no extended exchange of fire. The humans simply overwhelmed their target with coordinated firepower and moved on to the next threat. Primary target eliminated, Commander Hayes announced. Remaining enemy vessels are attempting to regroup. Delmonth turned to Dr. Harrison with disbelief clear in his voice. How is this possible? Hegemony defensive systems are among the most advanced in the galaxy. How are you able to penetrate their shields so easily? Dr. Harrison smiled with what appeared to be scientific satisfaction. Redundancy, Commander. Most advanced civilizations seem to rely on single, highly sophisticated defensive systems. Humans prefer multiple overlapping systems with different operating principles. When we engage an enemy, we attack with enough different weapon types that even if they can counter some of them, others will get through. But, the energy requirements. Ian Sarah protested. To power that many different weapon systems simultaneously should be impossible without massive reactors. We have massive reactors, General Webb pointed out matter-of-factly. Each of our capital ships carries 3 independent fusion plants plus backup power systems. We build our ships around the assumption that we'll need maximum firepower available at all times. On the tactical display, the remaining hegemony vessels had reorganized into a defensive formation and were attempting to engage the human ships at longer range. It was a sensible tactic. Their weapons had superior range and energy output compared to most civilizations' arsenals. Unfortunately for them, they weren't fighting most civilizations. Launch fighters, Admiral Chen ordered. I want full squadrons from all 3 ships. Objective is to break up their formation and force them into close engagement. Within minutes, the tactical display showed dozens of small craft streaming away from the human capital ships. But these weren't the small, fast scouts that most civilizations used for reconnaissance. These were heavily armed and armored attack craft, each one carrying firepower equivalent to a frigate-class vessel. Fighters away, came the report. ETA to engagement range, 4 minutes. Zethkar watched in amazement as the human fighters approached the hegemony fleet. The Zarthak vessels opened fire with their point defense systems, creating a deadly lattice of energy beams designed to destroy incoming threats. Most civilizations' small craft would have been annihilated instantly. The human fighters flew through the defensive fire as if it didn't exist. Their pilots executed maneuvers that should have been impossible, slipping between energy beams with precision that bordered on the supernatural. Those that were hit kept flying, their armor absorbing damage that would have destroyed most ships. How are they surviving that defensive barrage? Delmonth asked in wonder. Commander Hayes answered without looking up from his station. Fighter pilots are all enhanced. Genetic optimization, cybernetic implants, neural interface systems. They can process information and react to threats about 10 times faster than unaugmented humans. The implications of that statement sent chills through all 3 alien observers. These humans had deliberately modified themselves for warfare, creating pilots whose reaction speeds exceeded the capabilities of most civilizations' targeting systems. The fighter attack struck the hegemony formation like a hammer blow. The small craft swarmed around the enemy vessels, their weapons targeting specific systems with surgical precision. Shield generators, weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, everything that made the Zarthak ships effective was systematically eliminated. Enemy formation is breaking up, Commander Hayes reported. 3 destroyers have lost main power. The heavy cruiser is attempting to withdraw. Pursue and destroy, Admiral Chen ordered without hesitation. No survivors, no prisoners. The hegemony needs to understand that human space is not to be violated. The pursuit was brief and decisive. The human ships, unhampered by damage and operating at full efficiency, ran down the fleeing hegemony vessels one by one. Each engagement followed the same pattern: coordinated overwhelming firepower that penetrated enemy defenses and destroyed the target within minutes. When it was over, 12 hegemony vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. The entire engagement had lasted less than 20 minutes. All enemy vessels destroyed, Commander Hayes announced. Beginning salvage operations. No human casualties reported. Admiral Chen stood and turned to address the alien observers. And that, Commander Zethkar, is how the Terran Defense Force deals with territorial violations. The silence in the tactical center was profound. Finally, Sarah found her voice. Admiral, what you've just accomplished, this will change the balance of power in the galaxy. The hegemony has never suffered such a complete defeat. This wasn't a defeat, General Webb corrected her. This was a minor police action. We used 3 ships and a fighter wing. A real battle would involve entire fleets and last for days or weeks. Dr. Harrison consulted her device again. Actually, this engagement was somewhat smaller than average. Most of our encounters with hegemony forces have involved between 15 and 30 enemy vessels. Zethkar felt his understanding of galactic reality shifting again. How many ships does the Terran Defense Force possess? Admiral Chen smiled. That's classified information, Commander. But, I can tell you that this patrol group represents a tiny fraction of our overall fleet strength. And, you've been operating in this region of space for 8 months without any of the major galactic powers detecting your presence? We're very good at not being detected when we don't want to be, General Webb explained. Stealth technology was one of our early priorities when we began FTL operations. Dalmantha's bioluminescent patches were flickering rapidly as he processed the implications. Admiral, if your military capabilities are as extensive as they appear, why haven't you made contact with the Galactic Council? Surely formal diplomatic relations would be beneficial for both sides. Admiral Chen exchanged glances with her officers before responding. Commander, that's actually why this meeting is so important. Humanity has been observing the galactic political situation for several years now. We've concluded that the current power structure is inadequate for our needs. Inadequate how? The Council system seems designed to maintain the status quo between the 3 founding civilizations. New members are expected to accept client status under one of the major powers and abide by decisions made by species that may not understand their needs or capabilities. Sarah leaned forward. The Council system has maintained galactic peace for thousands of years. Surely that represents a successful diplomatic framework. For species that fit within established parameters, Dr. Harrison agreed. But, humanity's expansion rate, territorial requirements, and military capabilities don't fit traditional council models. We need a more flexible arrangement. Zethkar felt a cold certainty settling in his mind. What kind of arrangement? Admiral Chen's smile was polite but implacable. Commander, I think it's time for the galactic community to consider a new approach to interstellar relations. One that takes into account the realities of human capabilities and requirements. The alien observers looked at each other with growing alarm. They were beginning to understand that they hadn't just made first contact with a new spacefaring civilization. They had encountered something that would reshape the entire galaxy whether the existing powers wanted it to or not. The conference room felt smaller now, somehow more oppressive despite its unchanged dimensions. Commander Zethkar sat across from Admiral Chen, acutely aware that everything he thought he knew about galactic politics had become obsolete in the span of a few hours. The casual efficiency with which the humans had destroyed a hegemony fleet continued to replay in his mind, challenging fundamental assumptions about military power and technological capability. Commander, Admiral Chen began, I think it's time we had a completely honest conversation. No diplomatic niceties, no careful phrasing. The galaxy is about to change in ways that your council probably isn't prepared for. Dalmantha's bioluminescent patches were dim with exhaustion and stress. Admiral, with respect, I'm not certain our species can handle much more revelation today. We've already been forced to reconsider everything we thought we understood about military technology and territorial control. Dr. Harrison consulted her ever-present device before speaking. Perhaps it would help if we provided some historical context. Commander, what do your records show about the development of human civilization? Sarah, despite her obvious emotional strain, responded with professional precision. Our surveys identified Earth as containing primitive carbon-based life forms. Subsequent monitoring showed slow evolutionary development consistent with a pre-sentient species perhaps 50,000 years from achieving technological civilization. When was your last detailed survey of our home system? Approximately 5,000 years ago. Standard protocol calls for detailed surveys every 10,000 years for systems showing potential for life development. General Webb leaned back in his chair with what appeared to be amusement. So you missed our entire technological development period. Interesting. Admiral Chen activated the holographic display again, this time showing what appeared to be historical data. Commander, 5,000 years ago, humanity was indeed what you might consider primitive. We had organized agriculture, basic metallurgy, and early forms of writing, but no electromagnetic technology. What your surveys couldn't detect was that we were already demonstrating the characteristics that would eventually make us problematic for the existing galactic order. The display shifted to show population graphs, territorial expansion patterns, and technological development curves. Zethkar studied the data with growing unease. Even in our pre-technological period, Dr. Harrison explained, humans showed exponential population growth, rapid territorial expansion, and constant technological innovation. Most importantly, we demonstrated a persistent pattern of organized warfare on a scale that most civilizations haven't experienced since their pre-sapient period. Warfare, Insera repeated quietly. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting that continuous military conflict is somehow beneficial to species development? Not beneficial, Admiral Chen corrected. Inevitable. Commander, how many wars has the Kytherian collective fought in its recorded history? Zethkar consulted his personal database. 3 minor conflicts with neighboring species during our early expansion period. All were resolved through council mediation within a few years. We've maintained peace for over 4 millennia. In the past 5,000 years, General Webb stated matter-of-factly, humanity has fought approximately 15,000 documented wars, conflicts, and military campaigns. Some lasted days, others lasted decades. We've never experienced a period longer than 50 years without significant military activity somewhere on our homeworld. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Delmont spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. 15,000 wars? How did your species survive? The same way we've survived everything else, Admiral Chen replied. We adapted. We learned. We got better at it. Dr. Harrison manipulated the display to show comparative data. Most spacefaring civilizations develop advanced technology first, then expand into space using that technological superiority to avoid or quickly resolve conflicts. Humans developed under constant competitive pressure, which shaped both our technology and our social structures around the assumption that conflict is inevitable. The result, General Webb continued, is a civilization that approaches every problem from a military perspective first. Our industrial capacity, our technological research, our social organization, even our entertainment, everything is optimized for the assumption that we'll eventually have to fight someone for resources or territory. Zethkar felt pieces of a disturbing puzzle clicking into place. That's why your ships are so heavily armed. Why your reactor systems are oversized. Why your crew members maintain manual technical skills. You've built your entire civilization around the expectation of continuous warfare. Exactly, Admiral Chen confirmed. What we discovered when we began observing galactic civilization was a political system based on the assumption that rational beings would prefer negotiation to violence. That advanced civilizations would naturally move beyond military solutions to their problems. Which is correct, Insera protested. Advanced civilizations don't engage in primitive warfare. Disputes are resolved through economic pressure, technological exchange, diplomatic negotiation, unless one side is fundamentally unwilling to accept the outcome of those negotiations, Dr. Harrison interrupted gently. Commander, what happens when a species refuses to abide by council decisions? Economic sanctions. Technological embargoes. If necessary, limited police actions using minimal force. And, if a species has military capabilities sufficient to ignore economic sanctions and defeat police actions? Insera stared at her for a long moment before the implications sank in. You're describing a breakdown of the entire council system. No, Admiral Chen corrected. We're describing the current situation. The Council system works because all the major powers have roughly equivalent capabilities and share common assumptions about acceptable behavior. But humanity doesn't fit those parameters. General Webb stood and moved to the display controls. Let me show you something, Commander. This is human territorial expansion over the past 40 years. The holographic map zoomed out to show a vast region of space. Dots of light began appearing and spreading across dozens of star systems. The pattern was unlike anything in galactic history, not the careful, methodical expansion typical of advanced civilizations, but an explosive growth that consumed territory at an unprecedented rate. By Council standards, Admiral Chen explained, this level of expansion should be impossible. It requires massive resource expenditure, huge populations willing to relocate to frontier worlds, and military forces capable of securing and defending vast territories simultaneously. But humans aren't constrained by Council standards, Dr. Harrison added. Our population growth rate is approximately 10 times higher than the galactic average. Our industrial capacity is designed for rapid expansion. And our military doctrine assumes we'll need to defend multiple fronts simultaneously. Delmonth studied the expansion pattern with growing alarm. Admiral, this isn't sustainable. No species can maintain this rate of growth without eventually coming into conflict with established powers. Which brings us to the current situation, Admiral Chen said quietly. Commander, humanity has been in territorial disputes with 7 different species over the past 3 years. 3 of them accepted our proposed border adjustments and signed non-aggression treaties. 4 of them chose to resist. The hegemony? The 4th species to choose resistance. The other 3. Admiral Chen gestured to the display, which showed several regions of space marked in red. No longer exist as spacefaring civilizations. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Zethkar felt his nervous system struggling to process the implications. You destroyed 3 entire civilizations? We offered terms, General Webb said with professional detachment. Reasonable territorial adjustments, trade agreements, mutual defense treaties. When those offers were rejected and military action was initiated against human colonies, we responded appropriately. Appropriately? Sarah's voice cracked with emotion. You committed genocide against 3 species. We eliminated their ability to threaten human territory and populations, Admiral Chen corrected firmly. Their civilian populations were relocated to suitable worlds outside the disputed territories. We're not monsters, Commander. We're simply more committed to protecting our interests than most civilizations expect. Dr. Harrison consulted her device again. Actually, the survival rate for relocated populations has been quite good. We've developed extensive expertise in planetary colonization and refugee management. The casual way she delivered that statement made it somehow even more chilling. These humans had become so efficient at conquest that they had standardized procedures for dealing with displaced populations. Commander Zethkar, Admiral Chen continued, the reason this conversation is so important is that humanity is rapidly approaching the point where we'll come into direct contact with the 3 major Council powers. When that happens, we need to ensure that the outcome is optimal for all parties involved. What kind of outcome are you envisioning? A new galactic order that takes into account the realities of human capabilities and requirements. Modified territorial arrangements. Updated trade agreements. A more flexible approach to dispute resolution. Zethkar looked around the room at the human faces surrounding him. They were polite, professional, even friendly. But, underneath their diplomatic courtesy was an implacable determination that reminded him of predators discussing the division of prey. And if the Council powers refuse to accept these modifications? Admiral Chen's smile was gentle but absolutely terrifying. Commander, I hope it doesn't come to that. The Council has maintained galactic stability for thousands of years. It would be a shame to see that stability disrupted by unnecessary conflict. But, if it becomes necessary? General Webb answered with military directness. The Terran Defense Force currently operates approximately 12,000 active combat vessels, with production capacity for an additional 3,000 per year. We can field ground forces sufficient to occupy and pacify up to 50 worlds simultaneously. Our industrial base can support sustained military operations for decades without impacting civilian populations. The numbers were staggering. The entire Kytherian military consisted of perhaps 300 vessels, and that was considered substantial for their role in the Council system. "You're describing a force capable of conquering the galaxy," Delmenth whispered. "No," Dr. Harrison corrected. "We're describing a force capable of defending human interests against any conceivable threat. The fact that this level of capability might appear threatening to other civilizations is unfortunate." Insera leaned forward with desperation clear in her voice. "Admiral, surely there must be some way to resolve this situation peacefully. The Council system has worked for millennia. With minor modifications, perhaps accommodation could be reached." "Perhaps," Admiral Chen agreed. "But that depends entirely on how reasonable the Council powers choose to be when formal contact is established. Which, incidentally, will be happening very soon." "How soon?" "Our diplomatic mission to the Council homeworlds launches next week. 300 ships carrying our best negotiators, cultural specialists, and military advisors. They'll be presenting humanity's requests for territorial recognition, Council membership with appropriate status, and updated interstellar law to accommodate our unique requirements." Zethkar felt a chill run through his system. 300 ships for a diplomatic mission? "We believe in negotiating from a position of strength," General Webb explained. "It helps ensure that all parties take the negotiations seriously." Admiral Chen stood, indicating that the meeting was reaching its conclusion. "Commander Zethkar, I want to thank you for this conversation. It's been extremely valuable for us to understand the Council perspective on these issues. What happens now?" "Now, you and your crew are free to return to your vessel and report this encounter to your superiors. We ask only that you provide an accurate and complete account of what you've observed here today." Delmenth looked up with a mixture of hope and fear. "Will you allow us to leave peacefully?" Admiral Chan looked genuinely surprised. "Of course, Commander. We're not at war with the Kytherian Collective. You're free to go whenever you're ready." As they prepared to depart, Insera asked one final question. "Admiral, what do you think will happen when the Council learns about humanity?" Admiral Chen considered the question seriously before responding. "I think, Commander, that the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place." The bridge of the Wisdom's Edge felt different now. Commander Zethkar sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display showing the human fleet continuing their salvage operations with methodical efficiency. 3 hours had passed since their return from the Indomitable, and he was still struggling to process everything they had learned. "Commander," Navigator Yelthana called from her station, "I've completed our analysis of the debris field. The energy signatures confirm complete destruction of all 12 hegemony vessels. No survivors detected." "Acknowledged." Zethkar's voice sounded hollow even to himself. In the span of a single day, his understanding of galactic reality had been fundamentally altered. The appearance of humanity as a major military power changed everything about the political balance that had maintained peace for millennia. Delmenth approached the command chair, his bioluminescent patches dim with exhaustion. "Commander, I've completed my preliminary analysis of human technology based on our observations. The data is disturbing." "Proceed." "Their power generation systems are at least 3 generations more advanced than anything in our database, but they've packaged it in deliberately crude-appearing hardware. Their weapons technology combines multiple principles that shouldn't be compatible, yet somehow they've integrated them into coherent systems. Most importantly, their production capacity appears to be orders of magnitude beyond what any single species should be able to achieve." Insera joined them, carrying a personal pad filled with cultural analysis data. "Commander, the psychological profiles I've developed suggest that humanity is fundamentally different from any spacefaring species in our records. They appear to be genuinely comfortable with large-scale violence and territorial expansion in ways that most civilizations outgrow during their development toward technological sophistication." "Your assessment?" "They're not going to simply integrate into the existing Council system. They're going to reshape it according to their own requirements, and they have the capability to enforce their preferences through military action if necessary. Zethkar stood and moved to the main display, which now showed the broader galactic region. Human territorial claims were highlighted in red, spreading across hundreds of star systems in an expanding sphere of influence. What are our options? We could return immediately to Kytherian space and report this encounter to the collective leadership, Dalmant suggested. They need to be warned about human capabilities before the diplomatic mission arrives. We could attempt to establish independent communication with the other council powers, Insera added. If the three founding civilizations coordinate their response, perhaps some accommodation could be reached that avoids military conflict. Or, came a new voice from the communications station, we could consider the possibility that the humans are right about the need for change. All three senior officers turned to look at Communications Officer Vendara, who had been quietly monitoring human transmissions throughout their encounter. Explain, Zethkar commanded. Vendara gestured toward her console, which displayed fragments of intercepted human communications. Sir, I've been analyzing their internal communications patterns, and what I've found suggests that they're not simply aggressive expansionists. Their territorial claims are strategically focused on systems with specific resource requirements or defensive value. Their military actions have been targeted at species that initiated hostilities against human colonies. And their diplomatic proposals, based on what I've been able to decode, actually seem quite reasonable. Reasonable how? They're not demanding tribute or client status from existing civilizations. They're requesting recognition of territorial claims they've already established through settlement and development. They're offering mutual defense treaties and expanded trade relationships. Most importantly, they're proposing modifications to council law that would apply equally to all species, not special privileges for humanity alone. Dalmantha's patches flickered with confusion. But their military capabilities are being presented as defensive necessities, Vendara continued. Commander, from their perspective, they're a young civilization surrounded by potentially hostile species with unknown capabilities. Building overwhelming military strength could be seen as a rational response to uncertainty rather than aggressive intent. Zethkar considered this perspective carefully. The humans had certainly demonstrated military superiority, but they had also shown restraint. They had allowed the Wisdom's Edge to depart freely despite having obtained detailed information about Kytherian capabilities. Admiral Chen had been diplomatic and courteous throughout their encounter, even while making it clear that human interests were non-negotiable. Sir, Tactical Officer Krendel reported from his station, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Kytherian Command. They're requesting immediate status report on our encounter with the unknown energy signatures. The moment of decision had arrived. Whatever report Zethkar sent would influence how the Kytherian collective prepared for humanity's arrival at the Council homeworlds. An alarmist report might trigger military preparations that could lead to exactly the kind of conflict Admiral Chen claimed to want to avoid. A reassuring report might leave the Council unprepared for negotiations with a species whose capabilities far exceeded their expectations. Record message for transmission, Zethkar commanded. Priority Alpha classification. He took a deep breath before beginning. Kytherian Command, this is Commander Zethkar aboard the research vessel Wisdom's Edge. I am reporting first contact with a previously unknown spacefaring civilization identifying themselves as humanity or the Terran species. He paused, considering his next words carefully. This contact has revealed the existence of a major military power operating in the Outer Rim territories. Human technology appears to be comparable to or superior to our own in most categories. Their territorial claims encompass approximately 300 star systems, with military capabilities sufficient to enforce those claims against significant opposition. More importantly, humanity will be initiating formal diplomatic contact with the Council within the next few weeks. Their stated objective is integration into the galactic political system with appropriate modifications to accommodate their unique requirements and capabilities. Zethkar looked around the bridge at his crew before continuing. In my assessment, humanity represents both a significant challenge and a substantial opportunity for the galactic community. Their military capabilities are formidable, but their diplomatic approach appears to be genuinely focused on peaceful coexistence rather than conquest. I recommend that the collective leadership prepare for negotiations with a species whose power and influence may equal that of the founding civilizations. I am transmitting detailed technical and cultural analysis data along with this report. I strongly recommend that this information be shared immediately with Vorthan and Nexari leadership to ensure coordinated response to human diplomatic initiatives. He gestured to Vendara. Transmit immediately, maximum priority. As the message was encoded and transmitted, Dalmanth approached the command chair. Commander, are you certain that was the appropriate tone? We've essentially announced that the galactic balance of power has shifted overnight. Because it has, Zethkar replied simply. The question now is whether the existing powers will adapt to that reality or attempt to resist it. And, what do you think will happen? Zethkar looked at the tactical display showing human ships continuing their efficient salvage operations. I think Admiral Chen was correct when she said the galaxy was about to become more interesting. 3 days later, the first reports began arriving from the Council homeworlds. The Vorthan Empire had mobilized its deep space fleets and was conducting emergency readiness exercises. The Nexari synthesis had activated advanced research protocols and was attempting to develop countermeasures for reported human technological capabilities. The Kytherian Collective had convened emergency sessions of the Council leadership to develop a unified response strategy. But, perhaps most significantly, monitoring stations throughout the galaxy had begun detecting the movement of massive human fleets toward the 3 Council homeworld systems. The diplomatic missions Admiral Chen had mentioned were apparently escorted by enough firepower to conquer entire star sectors. Sir, Yelthada reported from her navigation station, I'm receiving reports of human fleet movements throughout this entire region. They appear to be conducting some kind of large-scale redeployment operation. Zethkar studied the pattern of reported movements. It wasn't an invasion formation, the human fleets were too spread out and moving too slowly for a military assault. But, it was clearly a demonstration of capability, a visible reminder of the military strength backing up their diplomatic initiatives. They're making a statement, Sarah observed. Showing the galaxy exactly what they're capable of before the negotiations begin. It's effective, Dalmanth admitted reluctantly. No one will be able to dismiss human proposals as unrealistic given this display of force. A soft chime from the communications station indicated an incoming priority transmission. Sir, Vendara announced, we're receiving a message from Admiral Chen. On screen. The image of the human admiral appeared on the main display, and she smiled when she saw Zethkar. Commander, I hope your journey home was uneventful. I wanted to thank you again for the productive conversation we had aboard the Indomitable. Admiral Chen. I trust your salvage operations are proceeding successfully? Very successfully, thank you. We've recovered some interesting technology from the hegemony vessels that should prove useful for future research. But, that's not why I'm contacting you. Admiral Chen's expression became more serious. Commander, I wanted to inform you that humanity has received responses to our diplomatic overtures from all 3 Council powers. I'm pleased to say that all 3 have agreed to formal negotiations. That's encouraging news, Admiral. I thought you'd appreciate knowing. The negotiations are scheduled to begin next week at the Nexari homeworld. I wanted to extend an invitation for Kytherian observers to attend if your leadership is interested. The offer was clearly significant. Human willingness to include Kytherian observers in the negotiations suggested they valued the relationship that had begun with this first contact encounter. I'll convey your invitation to the appropriate authorities, Zethkar replied. Admiral, if I may ask, what outcome are you hoping for from these negotiations? Admiral Chen smiled again, and, this time it seemed genuinely optimistic rather than predatory. Commander, I'm hoping for a future where humanity can take its place in the galactic community as a partner rather than a conqueror. We have a great deal to offer in terms of technology, resources, and defensive capability. But, we also have a great deal to learn from civilizations with thousands of years of experience in interstellar diplomacy. And, if the negotiations don't produce the outcome you're hoping for? Then, I suppose we'll have to find other ways to achieve mutual understanding, Admiral Chen replied diplomatically. But, I'm optimistic, Commander. After all, reasonable beings should be able to find reasonable solutions to their differences. After the transmission ended, the bridge of the Wisdom's Edge fell silent. Finally, Sarah spoke what they were all thinking. The galaxy is never going to be the same, is it? Sethkar looked at the tactical display one final time, watching the human ships complete their operations with the same calm efficiency they had shown throughout this encounter. In the distance, more human vessels were arriving to escort the salvaged technology back to their territory. No, he said quietly. But, perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing. As the Wisdom's Edge began its journey back to Kytherian space, carrying news that would reshape galactic civilization, the human fleet continued its work. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the alien research vessel disappear into hyperspace. Think they'll cause problems for us? General Webb asked as he joined her at the observation port. Admiral Chen shook her head. Commander Sethkar is a good officer. He'll report what he observed accurately, and his superiors will make rational decisions based on that information. And, if they don't? Admiral Chen smiled as she watched another human warship emerge from hyperspace, carrying supplies and reinforcements for the growing human presence in the region. Then, they'll learn the same lesson the hegemony did, General. The universe has room for everyone who's willing to be reasonable. The age of human dominance in the galaxy had begun not with conquest, but with a simple encounter between explorers. And, as news of that encounter spread throughout known space, every civilization would have to decide whether they wanted to join the new order or be swept aside by it. In the end, most would choose to join. Because, as Admiral Chen had noted, reasonable beings could usually find reasonable solutions to their differences. And, humanity, despite their overwhelming military capabilities, preferred to be reasonable. Most of the time.